BIONICLE, Journey's End. Written by Greg Farshty. Reading by Shadowcaber. Chapter 4. Months had passed since Makuta seized power in Matanui's universe, and yet he had still not grown used to the energies that were now his to command. As he soared through the void of space, heading for Bara Magna, he thought about how it all began. The Makuta species had been created by Matanui. They were to live inside of Matanui's then massive robot body, serving his interests and protecting the nanotech workers called Matoran. Their primary job was the creation of animals, fish, birds, and insects, collectively called Rahi, who would serve various purposes within the universe that existed inside Matanui. Over time, the role of the Makuta changed. They became actively involved in protecting Matanui from various internal threats, from races like the Baraki, the Skakti, and others. To aid them in this task, they created a species of armored warriors called Rakshi. These lethal creatures were made from the Makuta's own substance, and were loyal, fierce, and relentless in battle. The important responsibilities they had should have been enough for the Makuta. But from the start, they were cursed with ambition. They looked around and saw the Matoran honoring Matanui, the source of light, heat, and virtually everything else in their lives, and it frustrated them. After all, it was the Makuta who had created the birds that filled the skies, and the fish that swam in the waters. Why did no one honor, or better still, worship them? Frustration led to anger, which led to thoughts of revenge. If the Matoran admired nothing short of ultimate power, then the Makuta would seize that power and conquer their universe. That meant turning against Matanui and bringing him down. The risks were enormous. If their plan failed, Matanui would have no choice but to purge them. But if it succeeded... Teridax, leader of the Brotherhood of Makuta, hatched a complex, multi-layered plot. It began with the use of a virus to infect Matanui's robotic systems. When the systems crashed, Matanui lost consciousness and crashed into the waters of the planet Aqua Magna. Taking advantage of the chaos, the Makuta attempted to seize power, only to be driven off by heroes called Toa. Defeat simply fed the Makuta's ambitions. Teridax resolved that if he could not run the universe in Matanui's absence, he would become the universe. He would take control of the gigantic robot body, and leave the Toa, Matoran, and other denizens no choice but to obey him. It took 1,000 years of patience, manipulation, and even a few feigned defeats for his plans to come to fruition. Badly damaged by the crash, Matanui finally died. A Toa named Matoro, wielding the Mask of Life, brought the robot back to life at the sacrifice of his own existence. But before Matanui's spirit could return to his body, Makuta's consciousness took control of the robot. Since no form could have two guiding spirits, Matanui now found himself barred from his own body. Teridax's revenge wasn't done. He destroyed the rest of the Brotherhood of Makuta to make sure they could never recreate the virus that had downed Matanui. Then he forced Matanui's spirit into the Mask of Life and ejected the mask into outer space. At the time, Teridax had been confident that he had seen the last of Matanui. He thought surely the mask would float endlessly through space, or be burned up by a sun, or shattered by an asteroid. He was wrong. Only days ago, he had managed to get all of the robot sensors working again. Immediately, he detected the Mask of Life's energies on another planet, a place identified by electronic records as Bara Magna. If the mask still existed, then so did Matanui. This Teridax could not allow. Even though it was doubtful Matanui could pose any threat, Teridax wouldn't begin his conquest of the greater universe with a potential enemy on the loose. Matanui had to be destroyed. Activating the jets built into the robot, Makuta rocketed into space toward a final showdown with Matanui. It would be absurdly simple, land on the planet, crush the mask beneath his armored foot, and perhaps some of the inhabitants too, for good measure. Barra Magna would become a base from which to launch future attacks on other worlds, and its residents slave labor, and if they were lucky, part of Makuta's new army. Makuta Teridax increased his speed. He was anxious to eliminate the last remnant of his past and begin his glorious future. His strength was beyond compare, his power enough to destroy a world, and his resolve like iron. How could anyone stand against him? Tahu, Toa of Fire, was frustrated and furious. Months had passed since he first learned that his universe, every landmass, ocean, even the sky and the stars, were part of the interior of a giant mechanical being. Worse, he discovered this after the universe had been taken over by Makuta. Since then, he had led a rebellion against his now far more powerful enemy. But despite some minor victories, he and his allies had been unable to truly harm Makuta. It aided him. Here he was, a Toa, a hero, created to protect the Matoran villagers from harm. Yet he and his teammates had been unable to provide safety or security to any inhabitant of the universe. Now they were scattered, fighting skirmishes against Makuta's armored warriors, the Rakshi, and accomplishing nothing. His frustration had only grown in the last few hours. He and Onua, Toa of Earth, had prepared an elaborate ambush for a dozen Rakshi. Just as they were about to stumble into the trap, the creatures turned around and silently departed. "What happened?" snapped Tahu. "Did they spot the trap?" Onua rose, watching the column of Rakshi through narrowed eyes. "No," he said, with certainty. "Something else happened here, and I think we better find out what it was." Tahu spotted something, coming in low on the eastern horizon. It was a winged figure, one who looked vaguely familiar even from far away. As the newcomer drew closer, he recognized her as a member of the secretive Order of Motunui, skilled fighters dedicated to the cause of the Great Spirit. They had been some of the most powerful warriors in the fight against Makuta, but had also suffered terrible casualties in their ranks. The winged female fluttered tattered wings as she hovered above the two Toa. "I've been sent with a message. Rakshi are on the move all over, heading south. No one knows why, but they're massing into an army." "South?" wondered Tahu. "But there's nothing down there." The lower part of the robot was a scattered group of islands, largely uninhabited and of no strategic worth. Why would Makuta, and it surely was his work, send the Rakshi there? There was only one way to find out. "Find as many other Toa as you can," he told the Order agent. "Tell them we're going in pursuit of those Rakshi." "Tahu, what if this is a trap? What if Makuta wants us to leave every place else defenseless?" asked Onua. "If Makuta wanted to destroy all of us, plus every Matoran, he could do it in an instant," said Tahu. "He doesn't need tricks, not anymore. But if we can pen up his Rakshi and wipe them out, maybe we can slow down whatever he has planned." He looked back up at the flying figure. "Do it. Find whatever help you can. We have an opportunity, and I'm not going to waste it." Nektann stood atop the ruins of a once great structure and watched the Rakshi march past. The armored Sons of Makuta had been sent to the island of Zakaz to pacify its residents, the Skakti race. They had not been gentle in doing their job. It was still shocking to realize that Zakaz and everything around it was not part of a world, but just the insides of a giant robot. Nektann knew about being a warlord, but he was not an engineer, and did not comprehend how large machines worked. Wouldn't each part of a machine have to play a role? And if so, what was the role of the Skakti? His people had always been warriors, savage and brutal. Then a member of the Makuta race came and changed them, tinkering with their nature and making them even more violent and merciless. His goal had been to turn them into an army. but the result had been battle-crazed fighters who destroyed their own cities in an all-out civil war. Other species had feared and hated the Skakti ever since, and the Skakti had hated the Makuta. Now a Makuta ran the entire machine, and things had changed. Nektann had been the first Skakti warlord to ally himself with the new power in the universe. The other members of his species who objected to Makuta's rule had been taken care of by the Rakshi. And so, Nektann's legion fell into line behind the marching Rakshi, heading for boats that would carry them south. Nektann didn't know what was waiting for him or his troops among the uninhabited islands, but he did not hesitate to give the order to move out. After all, Makuta had promised them a new world to conquer. End of Chapter 4.